All right, time to flex those brain muscles, folks, because today we're going deep on building muscle. You want to know the fastest way to pack on that sweet lean mass? And we've got the goods to cut through all the noise and all that bro science. And we've got an expert's YouTube channel, some serious research papers. Let's get swole.
It's crazy how much bad info is out there. Like, you think you got to be benching a car to see gains. Not even
Bruh.
close.
The expert on YouTube actually says heavy lifting isn't everything. I was surprised too. So are we all good with just the pink dumbbells now?
Hold on now. It's not quite that simple. The real key is how your nervous system talks to your muscles, like finding that sweet spot. You're pushing your muscles enough to grow, but not so much you hurt yourself.
Okay, so how do we find that? Is there like a magic formula?
The research says lifting in the 30 to 80% range of your 1 rep max, that's the heaviest weight you can lift once. That's the sweet spot for growth. So you don't have to go super heavy all the time. Think quality over quantity, you know?
Makes sense. So even if I can't lift a ton, I can still build muscle by focusing on squeezing those muscles during each rep, even with lighter weights.
Exactly. It's about making those muscles work. Doesn't matter how much weight. Oh, and this was interesting. The YouTube guy says you need at least 5 sets a week per muscle group just to maintain what you've got. Doesn't sound too bad, right?
5 sets, honestly, that's doable. Even for someone like me who's not, training for Mr. Olympia, I can commit to 5.
And it's a good investment, especially as you get older. Think of it like preventative maintenance for your body. Those 5 sets help fight back against getting weaker and slower metabolism as you age.
Okay, 5 sets to maintain. But what if we actually want to get bigger? Recommends a beginner routine that's full of compound exercises, squats, deadlifts, bench presses, the big guns.
And there's a good reason for that. Compound exercises are like the superheroes of strength training. They hit multiple muscle groups at once. You get more bang for your buck in terms of growth. It's like hitting multiple targets with one arrow.
Love that analogy. And that goes perfectly with what the YouTube expert said about sets per muscle group. Yeah. With compound exercises, you're working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. Now, to keep those gains coming, we got to talk about progressive overload. It's how you keep challenging your muscles so they keep growing.
So it's like leveling up in a video game. You keep increasing the difficulty to keep those muscles guessing.
Yeah, exactly. It's about pushing your boundaries, but doing it gradually and safely. Could be adding a bit more weight, maybe squeezing out an extra rep or two, or even cutting your rest time between sets. Small changes over time lead to big results.
That's a good example. If you can squat 150 pounds for 4 sets of 6 reps this week, try bumping it up to 155 next week. It doesn't seem like much, but those little increases really add up over time.
Oh, absolutely. It's like building a skyscraper brick by brick. Each lift is a brick. And with consistent effort, you'll be reaching new heights. But even the coolest skyscraper needs a solid foundation.
And that's diet, right? Can't build a muscle mansion on ramen and energy drinks.
You got it. Crack the calorie code. Eat over 3,500 calories a day to actually see results.
3,500 calories sounds like a challenge. But seriously, it shows how important calories are for muscle growth.
Absolutely. The research backs this up on protein synthesis and energy use. You got to be in a calorie surplus, meaning you eat more calories than you burn. That creates the right environment for muscles to grow. It's like feeding a fire.
So we're not talking about restrictive diets here. It's about eating enough of the good stuff to support muscle growth. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Recommends focusing on calorie-dense, nutrient-rich foods. Think healthy fats like avocados and nuts, complex carbs like brown rice and oats, and of course lots of protein from lean meats, fish, and plant-based sources.
Okay, so we've got lifting and nutrition, but I know a lot of people, especially women, worry about getting too bulky from lifting weights. Is that really a concern?
It's a common fear. It's actually a lot harder than you think to accidentally get super muscular.
So no worries about turning into the Hulk after a few bicep curls.
Exactly. Especially for people who are naturally skinny. It takes a ton of effort and a very specific diet to get that bodybuilder physique. Research shows you need both intense training and the right food to get that kind of muscle growth.
That's reassuring. So if I'm just trying to get stronger and build some lean muscle, I don't have to worry about getting too big.
Right. And if you manage your calories well, you can prevent too much fat gain while still building muscle. It's all about balance.
Okay, so we've got lifting, we got nutrition. What's the final piece of the muscle building puzzle?
Rest and recovery. This makes a really good point about not doing too much cardio when you're trying to bulk up. They use the example of marathon runners versus sprinters like Usain Bolt. Marathon runners are super lean and fit, but they don't have that same muscular build as a sprinter. Why do you think that is?
Well, marathon runners are all about endurance, and sprinters are all about explosive power. So maybe it's something about how their training affects their muscle growth.
You're on the right track. Cardio burns a lot of calories, and those are calories that could be used to fuel muscle growth. If you're not careful, too much cardio can actually make you lose muscle, especially if you're not eating enough to make up for it.
So it's about finding the right balance between strength training and cardio. Depends on your goals.
Exactly. Also stresses how important good sleep is. Recommend 8 to 9 hours a night. They even have research showing that growth hormone, which is crucial for muscle repair and growth, is mainly released while you sleep. So if you're serious about building muscle, you got to get your Z's.
Sounds like sleep is our secret weapon.
Okay.
Who knew?
It's true. Speaking of secret weapons, there's one more thing I think we should talk about. The YouTube video kind of touched on it. It's all about the mind-muscle connection. Have you heard of that?
The mind-muscle connection. Yeah, I've heard of it. But I've always been kind of skeptical. Isn't that like a new agey thing?
Not really. It's more about being present and focused when you work out, really feeling the muscles work instead of just going through the motions.
So it's like mindfulness for your muscles.
Exactly. And there's actually some research that says this focused effort to connect your mind to your muscles might actually help them grow more.
Really? So like if I just think about my biceps, does that make them bigger?
Well, it's not magic, but it does use the power of your nervous system. When you focus your mind, you're sending stronger signals to your muscles. You activate more muscle fibers, and that could lead to more growth.
So instead of just lifting the weights,
Hmm.
I should be really picturing those muscles working, feeling the contraction,
Yeah.
really connecting with my body.
Exactly. It's like turning your workout into a mind-body experience. Now, the research on this is still pretty new, but I think there's definitely something to be said for being more present in your workouts. It can make a big difference in your results.
Sounds like something worth trying. I'll definitely try to be more mindful in my next workout. Speaking of workouts, we've talked about the basics, but I'm curious about some of the more advanced stuff. Things like supersets and drop sets. What are those all about?
Those are good ways to make your workouts more intense, really challenge your muscles in new ways. A superset is when you do 2 exercises back to back, with little or no rest in between. It's a good way to hit different muscle groups, or work opposing muscle groups.
So like I could do bicep curls and then immediately do tricep extensions.
Exactly. And a drop set is another technique that can really push your muscles. It's where you do an exercise until you can't do any more reps. Then you lower the weight and keep going for another set, and maybe even another one after that without resting.
Sounds intense. But what's the point of doing that?
It can help you break through plateaus and stimulate new muscle growth. You're basically shocking your muscles with these different training styles. You force them to adapt and get bigger. But it's important to note that these techniques are really for more experienced lifters, people who already have a good base of strength and know how to do the exercises correctly.
So don't try this at home, kids.
Probably not. It's best for people who know what they're doing and have the right equipment.
Okay. You mentioned that the YouTube expert recommends at least 5 sets per week per muscle group for maintenance. But what if we want to really maximize muscle growth? Are there certain training frequencies that are better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the research we looked at actually talks about that, specifically for experienced lifters. One study compared high-frequency training, where you train a muscle group multiple times a week, with low-frequency training, where you train it just once a week.
And what did they find? Is it better to hit each muscle group more often or let them rest more?
It's interesting. The study found that for experienced lifters, training a muscle group multiple times a week actually led to bigger gains in strength and size, compared to training it just once a week.
Wow, really? That's kind of surprising. I thought muscles needed a full week to recover and rebuild.
That's what people used to think. But this research challenges that idea, at least for people who are already strong. It seems like training a muscle group more often, even with lighter workouts each time, creates a more consistent signal for growth.
So it's about finding that balance between pushing the muscles and letting them recover.
Exactly. That's where the art and science of training meet. There's no one right answer. It's about understanding the principles, trying different things, and figuring out what works best for your body and your goals.
That makes sense. Speaking of trying different things, the research mentions some really cutting-edge techniques that I'd love to know more about. Things like blood flow restriction training and accentuated eccentric loading. Those sound pretty intense.
They are. Blood flow restriction training, or BFR, has been getting really popular lately. It's where you restrict blood flow to the muscles you're working, you use a special cuff or band, and then you do exercises with pretty light weights.
So you're basically making your muscles work harder by cutting off their blood supply. That sounds a little scary.
It's not as bad as it sounds. The restriction isn't supposed to be painful, and it's only for short periods during the exercise. And the results are pretty amazing.
So how does cutting off blood flow actually build muscle?
It basically overloads the muscle's metabolism. By restricting blood flow, you trap metabolic byproducts like lactic acid, and that triggers a bunch of responses that make the muscle grow.
Even with light weights.
Wow, so you can get similar results with lighter weights and BFR as you would with heavy weights.
Exactly. It's a really cool technique. And research shows it can be especially helpful for people recovering from injuries or people who can't lift heavy weights for other reasons. It lets them still challenge their muscles and grow without putting too much stress on their joints. That's awesome. Now, what about accentuated eccentric loading? That one sounds kind of intimidating.
It's definitely a more advanced technique. It's all about overloading the eccentric part of a movement. That's the lowering or lengthening part. For example, during a bicep curl, the eccentric phase is when you lower the weight back down.
So instead of just letting the weight drop, you're really controlling it and making the muscles work harder.
Exactly. And research has shown that this type of training can cause more muscle damage, and that leads to more muscle growth. But you usually need special equipment or a spotter to do it safely.
So probably not something to try at home alone.
Probably not. It's better for experienced lifters who have the right setup.
Okay, so we've gone from the basics to some pretty intense stuff. But before we get too carried away, let's go back to the fundamentals. Really emphasizes being consistent and following a good program.
Definitely. All the fancy techniques in the world won't matter. If you're not showing up and putting in the work consistently, it's like anything else, consistency is key.
This has a simple but effective 3-day full-body routine. It focuses on those big compound exercises we talked about. They suggest starting with a leg exercise, then a push exercise, a pull exercise, and a core exercise for each workout. It's a good way to hit all the major muscle groups without overdoing it.
And it's a great place to start for most people. It gives you enough rest and recovery between workouts, which is really important for muscle growth.
They also talk about how important it is to track your progress, whether it's the weight you're lifting, the number of reps you're doing, or just how you feel during your workouts. It's a good way to stay accountable and motivated.
Absolutely. Tracking your progress helps you see how far you've come, figure out what you need to work on, and celebrate those gains. It's like a roadmap for your fitness journey.
Speaking of journeys, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges people face when trying to build muscle. The dreaded plateau. That point where you feel like you're stuck and not making any more progress.
Plateaus are totally normal. It's important to remember that our bodies are really good at adapting. Over time, they get better at handling the stress we put on them. So what used to be challenging might not be enough to make us grow anymore.
So how do we break through those plateaus and get our muscles growing again?
That's where those advanced techniques we talked about can help. They can give your muscles a new challenge and kickstart that growth again.
So we need to be smart about using those techniques and bring them in when we hit a wall.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about the physical stuff. Our mindset is really important too.
That's so true. Nerd Fitness talks about having the right attitude, being patient, and celebrating the small victories. It's easy to get discouraged when you don't see results right away, but it's important to remember that building muscle takes time.
They also say it's important to find ways to make fitness fun. Maybe join a gym with a good community, or find a workout buddy who has similar goals. When you enjoy working out, it's easier to stick with it and reach your goals. And that brings us back to that mind-muscle connection we were talking about earlier.
The mind-muscle connection. Yeah. I'm really interested in that whole idea, like our thoughts actually affecting how our bodies change.
It's a powerful thing. Think about it. If you're doing bicep curls but you're not really focused, is that exercise really doing everything? It could be, probably not. But if you're really zeroed in on those biceps, feeling them contract with every rep, picturing those muscle fibers working, you're making that mind-body connection so much stronger.
So it's like we're mentally coaching our muscles to grow.
Exactly. And the research is still early, but some studies suggest that this conscious effort, this focus on the muscles, might actually help you build more muscle.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. Like we have this hidden power to boost our gains just by thinking differently.
I'm definitely going to try to be more mindful in my next workout, see if I can tap into that mind-muscle connection.
I think you should. It could be the missing piece. Well, we've covered a lot today, from busting myths to some pretty advanced techniques. It's amazing how much there is to learn about how our bodies work. But I think the biggest thing for me is that building muscle. It's not just about lifting and eating protein. It's about understanding the science behind it, being consistent, and really embracing the whole journey.
Couldn't agree more. It's about finding what works for you, trying new things, adapting, and most importantly, enjoying it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of muscle building, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out?
I would say focus on the basics. Master those compound exercises, make sure your form is good, and be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are impressive muscles.
Very wise words.
Mm,
And remember, everyone building muscle is a journey, not a destination. It's about pushing yourself, testing your limits, and celebrating all the progress you make along the way.
exactly. Enjoy the process, have fun with it, and never stop learning. The fitness world is always changing. There's always something new to discover.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll unlock the full potential of that mind-muscle connection. Until then, keep those muscles working and those minds engaged.
Happy lifting.
And keep diving deep, everyone. We'll see you next time for another knowledge-packed adventure.